Welcome back to News Talk. Tonight in prime time, for the first time, the Democrats running for president will square off in debate. Without Donald Trump on the stage, it's hard to imagine the raucous, unpredictable encounters we've been seeing on the GOP side. But what will we see? Joining us now with a preview, our special panel. David Mark is a political analyst and author. Kevin Robillard is a reporter for Politico. Robert Slazinger is managing editor for opinion at U.S. News and World Report. Welcome all. It's great to have you here. Thanks very much for your time. David, let me begin with you. We've become accustomed to a certain type of debate this cycle. They've been quite fun, quite entertaining, quite unlike the typical debate. Without Donald Trump, are we in for something very different tonight?
I imagine we are. For one thing, we're going to have a third as many candidates. We'll have 5 on stage on the Democratic side. There have been 10, and then the undercard of 4 or 5, depending how many you count in these debates. So there's just going to be fewer candidates. Also, there's no one, they were kind of stirring up the pot, like Donald Trump was obviously playing that role. He revels in that. Hillary Clinton wants to do the opposite. She just does not want to make waves. She wants to make as little news as possible and just go on with the lead that she's currently holding for the most part.
And Kevin, it's easy to dismiss Donald Trump. It's easy to kind of roll your eyes at the insults and just the general style that he brings. But there's no question he's had an impact. He's drawn people to their televisions. There's been a drama. There's been a sense of unpredictability about them. It may not be good for the process, but it has drawn a crowd, if nothing else.
Yeah, these first 2 debates on the Republican side have drawn record ratings. I highly doubt that we're going to see that on the Democratic side, particularly because the records were set during sort of the Hillary-Obama debates in 2008 were so high. And the fact is that that actually has something of an advantage for Republicans. The way some of them have tried to spin it is that there's so many people watching and getting exposed to Republican ideas that it can end up helping them in the long run. Whether or not that's actually true is debatable, but that's the idea. Republicans are sort of the grain of salt they're trying to take here. Democrats aren't going to have that level of excitement or that level of drama.
Will it surprise you if there's if tomorrow, when we look back at the numbers, that we will see a fairly good number at the outset, people checking it out to see the curiosity factor, what are the broad themes, what's the main dynamic, and then as baseball or something else lures them away, the numbers drop off.
Yeah, that wouldn't be shocking at all. It's also worth noting that these Democratic primary debates are sort of all scheduled against major sporting events. If you look at the ones later in the year, a number of them are on college football Saturdays or NFL playoff weekends.
By design?
Perhaps by design. I think Martin O'Malley, who's been complaining about the number of debates, might allege that they were maybe trying to minimize the ratings in some way to help Hillary.
Robert, in a typical scenario, those who are at polling, in single digits or in really low numbers, this is a moment for them to create a moment or to become more equal with the folks at the top of the pack. Are we expecting a pile-on tonight? Is Hillary Clinton the focus of much of what gets said on stage?
Yeah, I think it will be, because you've got the main tier, which is Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, are the people polling robustly. The absent chair will be Joe Biden, who's also polling robustly but isn't in yet. And then you have 3 people who are not even polling in single digits in a couple of cases. 0.4%, 0.9%. And so you're going to see them trying to figure out how to get into that main focus, into that Hillary Sanders dynamic.
What's the likelihood, David, that a Lincoln Chafee, a Jim Webb, or a Martin O'Malley has a breakout moment, something that gets said, or a back-and-forth encounter where the thing people are talking about tomorrow at the water cooler is the surprise, perhaps, move by one of these second-tier candidates?
Well, it's of course hard to predict or plan for these breakout moments, zingers, etc., whatever you might call them. You just kind of have to be there ready to pounce whenever the opportunity arises. Obviously, that's what's needed by Lincoln Chafee, Jim Webb, even Martin O'Malley, who was thought to be in one of the higher tiers, something that could go viral, not even the next day at the water cooler, but immediately online, get picked up as a meme, and somehow get fundraisers and donors to notice, because that's what a lot of the Republican candidates were really going for, even the lower-ranked ones who aren't doing so well in the polls. They just wanted to remind big donors that, yeah, we're still here, you can donate to us. If those guys don't have any kind of breakout moment tonight, it's really really tough to see a rationale for them continuing on, although arguably it's tough to see a rationale for them being in the race in the first place right now.
Some of the candidates, and this is true of others on the GOP side too, but you could walk down the street with photos and ask people, who is this? And they wouldn't know, to your point. Does anyone think that Sanders or the other three that we've mentioned will go after Hillary Clinton with a big roundhouse punch on the email server issue? Try to say, you know, you were dishonest, you weren't smart, your explanations have been all over the map, you cannot put this controversy behind you. This is a big problem, and this is why your candidacy is in trouble. Is it your expectation that someone will go hard and big at her on this?
I strongly doubt it, if only because it makes them sound too much like Republicans. This is an issue that Hillary has basically said is a partisan one. That's sort of their angle on it. And if they're picking up this Republican attack line, it probably won't play well with the Democratic base. I could see them attacking her, you know, in a more dramatic way on some other issue, perhaps TPP, perhaps some of the other things that she's been accused of flip-flopping on. But picking up what has been a GOP attack line on Hillary probably won't actually endear them to the people they're trying to win over. I could see the moderators trying to press her very hard on it, though.
Unless the president's comments on 60 Minutes kind of open the door to a broader critique and criticism.
I agree with Kevin mostly. Bernie Sanders has not really touched the issue very much. He's said he doesn't want to go on the attack in this. But if there's one candidate who you might look at Jim Webb, who has a military background, and he might use that as a way to frame his national security credentials and say, look, this was a threat to national security. And he's somebody who on many issues is a conservative Democrat, and so he doesn't mind being picking from the Republican pile of attacks.
What do you all expect in terms of the Sanders-Clinton dynamic?
Sanders, I think, is going to give a version of his stump speech, the same talk that he's been giving for 40-plus years now, running for office. He gives a version of it anytime he gives a speech. If you've ever tried to interview him in the halls of Congress, he basically gives you a somewhat truncated version of it. And to see him completely shift now would be a change in his brand, which would not necessarily help him that much. So I think we'll hear more of the same, and it's working reasonably well for him so far.
Kevin?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sanders has been complaining since really he started running that the media is too focused on getting him to attack Hillary Clinton. So I don't think he'll make sort of the explicit attacks on Hillary Clinton. There'll be lots of implicit criticisms of her. Like, for example, he'll talk about how he's always opposed trade deals or something along those lines. And that, while boosting his own image with labor in certain parts of the Democratic base, also hurts her by basically pointing out that she hasn't had that consistent record. But I don't think he will go after her directly in, sort of the way Donald Trump is willing to go after the other Republican candidates directly.
Some people, I think, may be reminded that when it comes to debates, this sort of thing is in Hillary Clinton's wheelhouse. Do you expect an all-star performance? And this is not this is not to diminish anyone else on stage, but are you expecting to see a real pro at work tonight?
I think we'll see a real pro, but also a real pro who hasn't actually played in the game in 8 years. And so she'll be good, but is she going to be in top form? No. She'll probably show some rust. They probably all will.
That's an interesting potential scenario.
There's another dynamic at play in that she will be the only woman on stage, and she's actually had some good fortune with her debate partners in the past. Rick Blasio, going back to the 2000 Senate race where he approached her lectern, or Barack Obama saying you're, quote, likable enough, Hillary, in one of the 2008 debates. So maybe she could actually play the victim a bit here.
I had forgotten that the approaching the lectern thing. That was a huge gaffe.
Yeah, that's right, and it sort of allowed her to play the victim a bit, and at least created some sympathy for her. Also, Hillary Clinton arguably beat Barack Obama during the bulk of the primary debates in 2008, even though, of course, she lost the nomination. So she's got some experience here.
Gentlemen, stand by. We pause here to update the hour's top stories and the forecast, and then more of our preview of tonight's first Democratic presidential debate.